Hello, everyone. So this session is about org design, how Skore can be used to design better teams, which is the title of an ebook we've written with Craig a long time ago. So the goal is to identify gaps in existing teams when essentially to respond to a change. So it can be an existing team, it can be a new team created from scratch, even though this happens quite rarely. But the organization needs to do something and something new, and we need to design or to staff a team to do that. So this is where in this session we look at how Skore can help. So what we'll do is we'll look at roles and responsibilities, we'll look at role design, job description, we'll also look at skills, and finally how to create an org chart, which is what we want towards the end. So who is this thing for? So I kept the list of participants, let's say, of the workshop, the drop-in I did a couple of weeks ago, but I've added on top of that, so of all the people involved in like mapping the processes in, it was a session about the process of process management. I've added the top management or a governance board, depending on how you want to call it. But this is where your design will take a new life because it will become real with actual new people being hired or people being retrained to do a job. So there's probably a governance board involved somewhere in the process. We will show when. And so how do we do it? I suggest we get started. So the first thing to understand is what does the success look like? Or what is it that you're trying to change? Why do you need to, why do you have these gaps in your team in the first place? Do you have a very good understanding? And how does the future look like in 12 months when you have all the new competencies or the new skills you need in your team, whether they are coming from people you retrained, from people you hired, or from agency? So I designed a little example to illustrate my talk. So this is a process about a company. They need better technical marketing documentation. All right. So they realized that they had more and more inquiries from people online on the web, and they just didn't have enough of the documentation, or their documentation looked very technical, very boring, and it wasn't really sexy. It wasn't really attractive. Their website is 15 years old and it does the job. There's a phone number and an address, but it doesn't do the job when we compare to the competition where they had fancy websites and videos explaining their solutions. So they really realized, all right, we believe there's a commercial risk in keeping our practice of doing not taking care of the visual look and feel of our documentation. We really need to address that. So the first thing, I mean, the wrong way to do would be to just draw an org chart and add a content designer and add a technical writer and a website manager. So all right, these are the skills we need. Off we go, let's hire people and they'll figure it out. That's probably the right way to do. There's the wrong way to do that, but there's a lot of companies starting like that. They start by designing an org chart. They make sure to promote the people that have been that deserve a promotion, and they make sure to manipulate all the politics of the company, but they don't think about the process itself, like how are we going to work. So our recommendation with Skore is always the same. Start with the process. Start by understanding what you need. And here I've mapped a very simple process, and I very voluntarily avoided to put the roles at the bottom, because first I need to understand what do we need. We need to prioritize the needs. We have 100 products and we won't be able to do all of them overnight. We need to assess the competition. Do they have videos? How can we differentiate? What are our strengths? So we probably need to do a little assessments. Someone will write an initial content. Then we will liaise with the technical teams to write more details of the instructions manuals, for example. Then we will make it beautiful. Once we have all the content, we will worry about the containers, and then we will publish. So put it on paper, brochure, websites, distributors, whatever, we will publish it. So this is the very first step of designing a team, is to first have a very clear understanding of what will these people do. And this starts by having a conversation, ideally in Skore. It's a tool that really facilitates this conversation by answering the question, what happens, what happens, what happens. So when I'm talking about what happens is the first question of a box. And once I have agreed, okay, this is the way we believe as a company would be the best way. Now we can start putting the people. So here, the prioritize the need would be the marketing manager. That would be done by the marketing assistant. That the marketing assistant can do that as well. So you see, it's very easy to add the role. Not showing anything new to no one here. Interesting one. Marketing assistant, and here we also need a product person. So there's a product development manager sounds perfect. It's already in my library. I can easily add it, but I could create a new one. Make beautiful formats. So that would be sort of a designer, or let's call it. We need a designer here. We really want, if we do it right. We want a designer in our team, which we didn't have. I just created it, and then distributing will probably be the marketing assistant again. So you see that I've added the roles very easily on a process, but of course in a workshop would probably require a bit more discussions. What we can do also is use Racy. I have done a session about Racy and Racy recently, so refer to that. But again, the main thing to remember about Racy is have a crystal clear definition of what R means for your organization and what the A means, because responsible and accountable of Racy, the C stands for consulted and I for informed. Responsible and accountable is it can be interpreted in different ways and be sort of synonyms. So be very clear on, okay, the accountable is really the person making the decisions, having the final say, the final validation of this prioritization, and the R responsible to make sure that this prioritization happens. For example, this is my definition. We could say the marketing assistant. This is where having Racy is quite powerful because we can start adding a lot of roles on the same box. And as a rule of thumb, I tend to use the A's for me only when there's really decisions making. I think it doesn't dilute the strength of the accountability too much. Here there are R, and maybe it's the marketing assistant which has the final say on the documentation. This is again a choice that is controversial. Maybe it's the product development manager who's the final say, but here it's a very heavily marketing-led process. So we'll say, all right, this is the marketing guy owning the documentation from A to Z. The designer is maybe responsible, and then they say, all right, okay, actually, he or she will work. But the marketing assistant has the final say on the design and stuff. If there's any questions, if there's any doubts or any design decisions to make. So now I have very quickly, I can have this conversation in my organization, putting the roles. And what I recommend again, so first phase, we map the process without thinking too much about the roles. Here we are mapping the roles without thinking too much about who will do that. It's very hard, especially in a smaller company. When we write marketing manager, many people will know in your organization who we are talking about. But again, it's good to do sort of abstraction between the role name here and who will actually fulfill the job. Sometimes when a job is, it's not completely clear. It's not completely clear what it entails and what are the skills or competencies that are required. We can use the attachments, and I've prepared it here for this make beautiful content for all formats. We said, right, we need digital design and graphic design. These are the two skills that we will look at. It's two different fields. Designing for the web is absolutely not the same as designing for paper, and as this potential company did set the bar very high, they said, all right, they identify that they will need two different set of skills under the designer role name. Or we could do that as a skills level. We could also have two roles, graphic design and digital design. Another point I wanted to cover here is very often when we map process, we end up, and there's like the managers never appear anywhere in a process, but everybody knows management is quite essential to making operations work smoothly in an organization. So manager role will be to prioritize, probably do all the evaluations, people prioritize and make the decisions, or get the inputs from other departments that someone may not have access directly to. So this is why I quite like. I never forget to map this sort of governance steps, prioritize the needs, because they are an obvious place where the managers will appear. If my process was only about creating the technical documentation, it would start here, right? It would start at we have a list that is given to us, appears by magic, but this process wouldn't highlight at all where the marketing manager is involved. So very often, if you want to have a very good understanding and also a job description for the management task of all these governance kind of prioritization, board approval, review committee, all that are quite important, and you can list, especially using Racy, you can list all the roles that you need to involve. So yeah, don't neglect this governance process. And also, it's good to highlight to a manager, all right, there's all the management role that is necessary to manage a team. The bigger the team, the more there is in terms of evaluation, managing personal needs, recruitment, and all that. But there's also often, I hope, real needs to operate the business, like prioritize the documentation needs. Okay, so then I've done my process. I've done my role in a second discussion. Now I can look at the roles. So what I'll do is I'll go in the business tools. I go in the roles. Okay, now I can see all the roles that are involved. So I have 4 roles in my process, which sounds right. All this information, what Skore does, it just surfaces information. All right, okay, that sounds about right. If I had 10 roles for a very small process, I would say, all right, there's an indicator that there will be a lot of complexity to manage. But to me, 4 roles sounds obvious. The marketing assistant, as expected, is the most involved, which is fine. We are comfortable with that. This is a process that is led and run by the marketing assistant. Even though when I click on the marketing assistant, what I see is that this person has R's and A's. So in my definition of accountability, the A is really about making the decisions. Right? So maybe you don't want someone too junior there. You want someone that will work with the technical team, that will work with them, have the final say. With someone that will own all the final decisions on the design. So it's very informative to see the balance of R's and A's and C's, maybe if you're using them, that someone will use. So interesting insights here. Okay, a role that is not too junior here, right? Someone that lots of responsibilities. Now the other things I'm seeing, I see, all right, there's numbers of interactions with other roles, marketing manager, product development, designer. So this person will work with different teams. Again, interesting to know. So when you're recruiting, you want someone that is comfortable talking to designer. We'll come back to this role. There's a lot to say. Or talking to the product development team to lead them, to train them on how to write good marketing documentation for their materials. So again, it helps me, it informs me on what kind of profile, what kind of teams I'm looking for. Let's have a look at the designer itself. Also, it raises quite a lot of questions. The designer we see is involved in making things beautiful, works with the marketing assistant. As we guessed from the sort of technical aspect of this company, this is not a company where the designer may have the longest career, or marketing designer, not a product or an engineer, but a designer in the sense making things beautiful. So this is also something to take into account when creating these kind of roles. Is should it be someone in-house that we are training or that we are hiring and will have a career in our document, in our organization? Is it someone that we will recruit, but because there's not a massively obvious career path, this person may stay for a couple of years and then go away. So we need to take into account that, okay, this is a sort of a role that we need for organization. We are happy to hire people, but we expect they will get bored after a couple of years and they will probably move on, and we need to retrain someone because there's no obvious career path to grow in terms of responsibility, in terms of size of the projects, in terms of climbing the hierarchical ladder. So these are things to take into account. So maybe for the designer in my scenario here, it's better to have an agency, where someone can have several projects at the same time. Again, when we looked at the when we looked at we have the digital design skill, we have the graphic design skill. We know they are quite different, and we are looking for one role that has these two skills, but we can't really hire two designers, because it's quite different. Maybe using an agency to do this kind of role is also useful. We could have the opposite. Let's say we are a bigger organization. Clearly, there's enough volume to keep a digital design and a graphic design person busy. So we can easily go back to the process and look again at the process and the activities and say, all right, let's split this role. This role doesn't make sense as one person. Let's split this role: designer, web designer, and graphic designer. Could be also how the conversation leads. So looking at the role consistency is important when designing the teams. So designer, I think in our case, this is still it's a small organization, and they will say, all right, we need designers for these projects. We'll take an agency because we need web design, graphic design. We don't have enough volume for two roles, and people will get bored because at some point it will be quite repetitive. So let's take an agency that will manage this process for us. Another good thing to look at when starting to think about the implementation. So you said, all right, there's a marketing assistant, which is not a junior person. There's a designer, which is probably an outsourced role. We can also look at the timeline for hiring. So there seems to be quite a lot that can be done without having the design agency. So here we can think, okay, we can start prioritizing the needs. We can start doing a lot of things on this process without having the design agency yet. So it's not having a designer is not a blocker for this process. To the opposite, the product development is very important because we need them to review the documentation to make sure that we are not saying wrong things, or that they really explain us how things work, and they are available to shoot videos maybe. So in this case, it's worth liaising with another team. So it's always very challenging when we are designing a process that is obviously from a marketing point of view, but here I'm assuming that the product development manager will be available for me. The problem is that the incentive of the marketing department will probably not be the same as the incentive of the product development manager to make this process flow, right? We can imagine the marketing assistant having a sort of a bonus at the end of the year if 50% of the portfolio has been put online with at least one picture and one e-commerce page, let's say. I make it up as I'm talking. But for that, we need the product development manager, and it may happen, all right, product development manager actually super busy until the end of the year. They have 1,000 other projects that have been prioritized by the organization. No time whatsoever to participate in your marketing thing that we don't care. So be careful about that. Be careful about the divergence in rewards and recognition and incentives to make these processes that become cross-functional happen. There's no magic wand here. It all starts again back at the company strategy. If the company strategy is that having documentation, fancy, cool videos and documentation online is a priority, they should look at all the teams that are involved, and not only at about the marketing, because it's a marketing thing to have cool documentation. So there should be a strong alignment, and we can flag that as a risk. Again, using the custom fields could be a very easy to say risk. There's a high risk, never a priority for product development manager to be involved in documenting things for marketing, or whatever. We can capture the risks. This is what the custom fields are great for, just to flag it. Okay, this whole process may fall apart if we don't have the good involvement of the product marketing, product development manager. Okay, next. So we've discussed all the roles as a team, as a governance. You will do a plan. You will probably approve these job descriptions, or base your approval based on it. Okay, the marketing assistant role that we need for this process. And here again, I'm taking just one process. Your real life example may be much wider than that. This is basically these roles and responsibilities the marketing assistants will have. Makes sense. We sign off. We know how many we need, 1, 2, 10, depending on the sizing of the team, which is by itself just a full topic. But we can estimate how much we need or how much we can start with. We know that we've agreed with the product management organization that they will need to dedicate time. We make sure they have incentives to do so. So we can create an org chart. We can do a staffing plan. Say, right, we'll have this new marketing assistant will be trained. The designer agency is coming in 3 months, so we have 3 months to find them. We've aligned the incentives for people. It's the job descriptions have been rediscussed with the people involved, and then it comes to we are coming to okay, let's say everyone now is there by magic. We recruited everyone. All the HR part of work has been done. It starts to transition the role, and here this is where having processes comes back in force. Is okay. You have your new product development manager, your new marketing assistants that will lead these kind of initiatives. This is where of having this high level process is very good because they can share. And maybe the marketing assistant, marketing product development manager, what they will do, they will refine this process. They will, okay, now it's time to actually make this process alive, to do it. So maybe they will refine it. And I find this approach work very well. Having a design team that designs a high level process, could argue that what I've written here is already quite low level, but mapping a big ideas, and then having, once the teams are in place, let them define the lower level activities. So for example, what does that mean to write the initial content? So either I could do a drill down. So we could map I'm taking my inputs and my outputs from the level above. What does it mean to write the initial content? Is it like the outline? It could be the list of graphic assets required. It could be etc. So give the team the chance to detail the process, how they will work together. Maybe it's worth deep diving in this activity as well, how the marketing assistants and the product development manager will work together. Will they sit down once a month for a full day together? Maybe that's the way they agree to do. Or will they just work per email, or they will set up a common Google Docs, or I don't know. But this is a good practice to give it to the team to manage their transition to this new process on their own. I've seen that in an organization, and it worked very well for everyone to own the process. Yeah, so I think role transition. Yep, I think I've said what I wanted to say. Let me go back to the initial drop-in design teams. Yeah, governance. Yeah, yeah, and also what I mean by the governance board is probably the team that will review this job description and approve the timeline of hiring and the timeline of role transition, because nothing is very simple in terms of these team transitions. So if the marketing assistant has a new role of creating this fancy new technical documentation, they would probably have to stop doing something else. And this is all the kind of things that can be discussed in a governance board. That's it for my my little introduction to that. It's processes that take weeks, if not months, if not years. So summarizing that in 26 minutes is obviously a very, very short introduction. But more than happy to. Is there any questions, any comments, any things to add that I may have missed?